My name is Katie Bellotti, and I'm a self-employed graphic designer and digital storyteller with love for psychology and shaking the dust off of untold stories. Allow me to introduce you to a cocktail of past and present. My podcast, Thick and Thin, is a spoken diary mixed with tales of people from years past who lived their lives in full color. Because, as many of us know, life isn't a straight line. No matter the decade, we're all writing our own stories, finding new ways to show up for ourselves through the thick and the thin. So pause the show you're listening to right now, grab yourself a martini, and go subscribe to Thick and Thin on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Cheers!
Stony Island Audio.
Yo, what up, y'all? My name is Open Mike Eagle, and welcome to What Had Happened Was, Season 2, Episode 6. We are once again sitting with Mr. LP, who's the subject of this entire season, as we explore his various projects and ups and downs in the music business and in life. And this is following Season 1, where we spoke with Prince Paul, the legendary DJ Prince Paul, and did the same thing. And speaking of both of those seasons, you can wear both of them. You can wear both of them. If you like to listen to them, you can also wear them. There's t-shirts available for Season 1 and Season 2 of What Had Happened Was. If you search Merch Engine, What Had Happened Was, Merch Engine, What Had Happened Was, you will be given access to purchase Season 1's t-shirt or Season 2 while supplies last. We are running low. We've sold a bunch already, and we're down to our last few available for both. I don't want to say how many exactly because I don't know when you're going to be listening to this. So if I say any number, it's probably going to be a lie by the time it gets to you. But know that they are selling out soon, and we're going to begin shipping them next week. So go ahead and do not hesitate and grab that t-shirt now. Search Merch Engine, What Had Happened Was, to get access to one of them, their shirts. And there's two to choose from. This is the Stony Island Audio Network. This is What Had Happened Was on the Stony Island Audio Network. My name is Open Mike Eagle, and Stony Island is a network that I have convened and curated with folks in the hip-hop space to give themselves a voice, to be able to have the opportunity to create their own narrative. For a lot of times, people in this hip-hop world, they don't get that opportunity. Their narrative is either defined by people's public opinion, or the narrative is defined by writers, or the narrative is defined by public relations people, and that can all line up and be great. But I think it's the greatest thing in the world to be able to get that context from the artists themselves, or the writers themselves, or the parents themselves. And I say those categories specifically because that represents shows that are on our network. The Fatherhood Spot with DJ EFN, Manny Digital, and KGB. Super Duty Tough Work with Blueprint and Illogic. Dad Bod Rap Pod with Nate LeBlanc, David Mon, Damone Carter. Can't Knock the Shuffle with Sean Kantrowitz. Self Quar with Baron Vaughn. And we got a couple more things we adding pretty soon, so stay tuned. This is What Had Happened Was, Season 2, Episode 6. The subject of this interview with Mr. LP is his second album, his second solo album, I'll Sleep When You're Dead. I enjoyed this conversation a lot. I know that in the last one we covered Def Jux, and as great of a time that was musically, there was a lot of darkness in that era. There was the troubles that led to the label having to shut down. There were the fates and choices some of them people made coming out of that period, which was stuff that we didn't really want to dig into, but stuff that I think definitely infused the conversation as we weren't able to fully celebrate the releases out of the context of everything else that went on. I really like this episode. I really like this conversation because I feel like L's really proud of this album, and it's such a goddamn great listen. It's a beautiful piece of music, and it's great to hear all of the stories and reasons and choices and circumstances that all led to its creation, from working with Trent Reznor and being overjoyed at the amount of music that Trent sent him back to be able to use, to, the blog that L made on a whim and didn't think anybody would catch on to it, that still lives on to this day, where he was charting, making the album and telling all these stories and growing a big nasty mustache. We get into all of it here. Season 2, Episode 6. What had happened was, I'll sleep when you're dead.
Back it up.
You guys get some snaps from LP.
Open my ear. Yeah, deluxe labor, the underground undertaker, the whole capers, independent as fuck flavor. Audio exhibit, visit the history. To him winning without fucking with the industry, and him losing without fucking with the industry. No illusion, we tracing every movement in the symphony. This is official, from lifting of pencils, cold flow to depth jugs up to the fist and the pistol. I'm sending questions like infinite missiles, digging for details when stories from the past come up. And if he don't remember, then he has to shrug. It's what the podcast does. What had happened was, what up, good people of the internet? My name is Open Mike Eagle, and this is another episode of What Had Happened Was, with our perpetual guest. He's trapped in the
Forever.
prison of self-reflection with us. Give it up for our guest on the hot seat the whole season. Give it up for LP, y'all. Applause in your mind. Applause in your mind. How you doing today, sir?
Use your mind hands. I'm good, man. I'm chilling. I'm just working.
Word.
Which is something that I realize that is the only time that I'm happy, really. It's just like when I have to obsess over something. If I don't have any music, then I have to have like a project, like file organization or something. Like I have to do something with my mind. Other than that, I'm chilling, man. No complaints other than the officially registered perpetual complaints about the state of the world.
Yeah,
those are on the record though, so you don't need to rehash those.
Absolutely. Well, we will rehash something today. Your second solo LP. Ugh, I didn't like that at all.
Yeah. Imagine being me.
Good.
Imagine being me.
I know.
Yeah.
I just had this odd flash of how many times that must have happened to you. Gosh.
It just goes out. It just washes over me at this point. It's fine.
At this point.
Yeah.
No, I get it. We're talking about I'll Sleep When You're Dead, 2007's release on your own Def Jux imprint. And man, it's been really dope, like sitting with this album again. I remember I bought it when it came out. Like I had the CD, I was driving around LA with it. Like
cool.
And I don't know, man. I'm going back to it now. It's like, man, this thing is like really great. I think the story of it for me, and this is what I want to get into you with about it, is it seems to speak to a musical evolution for you, but I don't quite know how to describe it because it's not necessarily introducing anything that wasn't there before at all. It just seems to be more boldly something else. And I was wondering from your perspective, if that's the way was it seen for you as a different approach and something that you could spell out for us listeners?
It's definitely my favorite solo record that I've done. And I love Cancer for Cure too, but it was a step for me. I think that's probably why I like it so much. Fantastic Damage was everything that I could think of with absolutely no editing and complete disregard for anyone else's time but my own. And just being like, it's all here. Like every single thing that I thought of during the time that I was making this record is here. And I think that those songs in a lot of ways were it was stream of consciousness in the sense that I think I was writing to find out what I was writing about, you know, like I was just sort of writing and trying to figure out what the fuck I was trying to say and then landing it eventually, but it was maximalist. I let the songs run on, I let the thoughts go on. And by the time I had gotten 5 years later to this record, I was a better rapper, I was a better producer, I was a better writer. I had decided that I wanted to make songs that were really specific. I wanted to tell stories. I wanted to inhabit characters. And so those songs themselves, they all really had a point. They all really had a part to play in this story. that was sort of an abstract documentation of how I had been feeling for the past however many years. But instead of it just being like, I'm Jamie Moline and this is how I feel, which I think in some ways Fantastic Damage was that. I was sort of introducing the person to the world as opposed to just being like a slick rapper. And that was something that I think I had to write a lot to get to on Fantastic Damage because I hadn't really done it that much before.
Right.
So by the time I got to Sleeping Your Dead, I feel like I really wanted to refine it. As a writer, I really wanted to make every word count, and I wanted to not have a wasted moment if I could. And also, I think I had gotten sort of sonically more proficient. I had really got, I had stepped my game up. I had done a lot of work. I had done a lot of people's records. I had done a lot of different genres. I had worked with different people throughout the years and kind of stepped up my game, I think on every level.
You mentioned your increase in proficiency. I mean, this album sounds like more musical in the traditional sense, for sure, where like there's all these chord changes and everything and movements within songs. We've talked a lot about your journey through hip hop, but like I feel like this album demonstrates like some real experience with like music theory and what is your history with like classical training when it comes to like music stuff?
Apart from when I was a kid and played piano and some trumpet and some saxophone, but was never really great at any of it. Didn't catch my attention. It was like the couple of years that I played saxophone, I remember they abruptly ended when I caught a glimpse of myself doing it in the mirror, and I was like, oh no, I can't do this. I was like, there's no future here. There's no future here. I just look ridiculous. But I think that the music theory was self-taught. It was self-learned. It was just years and years of crafting music and also working with other people brought something out of it. During the time that I had spent in between those records, I kept busy. I was doing a lot of stuff and I started to get called for a lot of remixes of bands, not like shit like Nine Inch Nails and Mars Volta and Beck
TV
and like
on the radio.
I had done a jazz album. I had scored a film. All of this stuff, all of these projects, I always took them because for me, it was a chance to kind of sharpen my blade and to bring something back. And it was always to bring something back to what I did. Because what I do, that's my life work. These are the things that I want to be remembered by. And it was always like 5 years in between them. And I was really fucking trying to learn something in between. I was trying to make sure that when the next time you heard me or the next time that I kind of sat down to the table, that I had a new set of understanding, a new set of tricks up my sleeve, some sort of refinement, something that you could listen to the shit and be like, he's growing, he's stepping somewhere. And a lot of those things that I did sonically, they had to be really on point. A lot of it was major label shit that I was remixing, and it was like I had to like up my gear and shit just to even open the files the motherfuckers were giving me. Like Mars Volta would send you like a fucking 1,000-track file, and you'd open it, and your computer would explode, and you'd just be like, "I can't, what's happening?" So I spent a lot of money and time getting my gear up, and also working with other people doing these other projects. And so I just kept kind of learning and refining what it was I wanted to do with these songs. Fantastic Damage, there was a lot of movement in those pieces of music, but it always felt like movement, like entropy. It was movement like you took a fucking like a dollhouse, threw it down a flight of steps, and by the time it got down, it was just exploded.
It had changed by then. Yeah,
it had changed, and you didn't know what the fuck happened. And this was a little bit different. I think it was more intentional. I wanted everything to fit like a glove. Really just constantly working to kind of figure out this craft, because I'm totally self-taught. I'm not
great.
Like we all are, like we all are. I think that that's the beauty about hip-hop music, is that kids get involved and they treat it like a fucking Lego set. And you start to use your influence on this thing. And because we're untrained, and because we are sort of looking at it evolving from a perspective of people who are just ripping shit apart and mashing it together, We had this
Right.
different way that we grow up in music. You know, we have a different way that we become musicians. And I wanted to be able to look at this and be like, look, this is not something you can just do. You know, like you have to like, you know how everyone just thinks, you know, everyone who doesn't know hip hop music or whatever, like all the adults in your life always just thought it was just some fucking cheap way out. It's like, no, it's not a cheap way out. It's a fucking craft. And I dare you to tell me how I made this. You know, like there was another thing too, which is that I was kind of tired of getting on stage and just fucking rapping at cats for like, you know, 4 minutes and then stopping and then doing it again. I wanted to make jams that I felt like I could perform on stage that had emotional content, rises and falls and crescendos and things built into it that would lend itself to a good show. Something that was powerful because of what the music was. That was my goal with this record. And I think it was the first time that I kind of landed on that. Like I kind of did it for whatever it was worth, you know, for what I could do at the time. It was a storytelling record.
Yeah. And it really is crafted, man. One thing I found really interesting listening back to it and knowing I'd be able to talk to you about it was even like the transitions from song to song. They're so seamless, and earlier work didn't have that. Earlier like songs were kind of just self-contained songs. Was stuff like that, was that stuff that you just knew you wanted to do when you were making those songs? Did that happen in like the mastering process? Like the seamless nature of the album, like how did that come together for you?
Yeah, I mean, I started making songs in batches. I started making songs and creating them in batches. I wanted this first song to be able to relate to the last song and the second song to be able to relate to the second to last. I wanted to craft something that never fucking let you go. And that wasn't just like rappity rap 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 fade. And then, you know what I mean? And then like rappity rap 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 fade. You know, like, you know, I just figured, fuck it, man. This is my canvas. Like, and I gave myself all the time in the world to do it. I was notorious for taking 5 years between records. And when you're taking 5 years between records, it wasn't because I was taking 5 years. It was like I was dealing with a whole bunch of other shit. I had a fucking record label that I was trying to run, and I had so I never had any time to myself. So really, it was like I was taking like 2 years. But I would say over the course of those 5 years, I was making music that was going towards it, and I never rushed myself. I always let myself obsess over the shit, and I definitely obsessed over that record. Like I just kept tinkering with it, and to the point where it was. Eventually it was just like, all right, you gotta let it go, man. You gotta stop. But I felt really good about the result.
Two of the songs on here that I feel like were really like linked, like when I listen to them, they like, even though they're two wildly different, they're one right in front of the other and they feel linked. Habeas Corpses into Overly Dramatic Truth. Now I don't know if those were made in a batch, but let's just start with Habeas Corpses, which to me is like, I listen to a lot of shit like Frank Zappa, They Might Be Giants, King Missile, like all of these indie bands, and then like, Zappa of course is a classic musician. But one thing I've always marveled at in rock music is how imaginative those artists are allowed to be. Like they get to craft these stories and these worlds that hip hop in a large sense, it wasn't encouraged in hip hop. Like, you know what I mean? It always felt a little weird, but like this is a wild story in this song, Habeas Corpses, you and Cage. Like, it takes a long time to really understand what's happening. And it's like all these it's like a little movie.
Two types of people in this world to recognize. Conquered in the one hold and the right for the next in line. The crosshair, my eyes, a vessel to guard. The container that kept you around in a hole in the yard.
I would love to hear a little bit about like coming up with the idea and like bringing Cage into it, and just what that experience is like of putting that song together.
There's sort of a war trilogy in that record.
Run the Numbers and the Habeas Corpses into Overly Dramatic Truth.
But before that is Dear Sirs, correct?
Yep, Dear Sirs and then Run the Numbers, yeah.
Right. I have to go back into this to explain Habeas Corpses.
Got you.
Dear Sirs was my fantasy of what I would say if I were drafted to go to war for this country. And the idea being that my statement in response to being drafted would be, even if the most unbelievable, impossible, fantastic, and ludicrous things were to occur, they would still be more likely than me fighting in a war for you.
If the pavement comes alive, I'll flap a toothy smile comprised of traffic cones and manholes become eyes. And birds burst into flames while singing Satan's praises and fall into the sky and rain down ashy danger.
And that was the idea of that letter. Like sitting there and typing this furious letter, like even if the streets became water and even if like it's still more likely to happen than me fighting in a war for you motherfuckers.
It's like the opposite of a love song. It's like,
it's like definitely not a love song.
The opposite of I would climb the highest mountain. It's like the mountains could turn to shit before I would do this for you.
Yeah. We could literally, like the fucking, like people could turn into snow cones and it would still be, like, that's weird, but what's weirder? The idea of me going to war for you. And that led into the run the numbers shit, which is kind of, in an abstract way, sort of being like in the shit, kind of being in the war.
Broken and bleeding right attached to the Brooklynite vagrant. Half of a body monkey, I'll be born of our agent. Random tarantula known to handle the face of drunken. Drifted on city park benches under the fritzy tongue.
Habeas Corpus, it's a sci-fi fantasy allegory.
Right.
That's all. I mean, that's really obviously what it is, I just imagined, I imagined a future world in which fascism had, emerged and taken over. And I just tried to get myself in the head of one of these average Joe schlub motherfuckers who gets up every day, puts their fucking camo on, loads up their rifle and goes down to the fucking job. And the job is they shoot motherfuckers. They execute whatever they may be, prisoners, refugees, prisoners of the system, the working Joes of the concentration camp. The guys who, when the shit comes down and there's finally some tanks outside of their building, they say they were just following orders. I wanted to get into their head for a second. And with the idea that the rising of fascism is directly associated with the destruction of empathy. Fascism does not work unless you can first eliminate empathy in the common man. One of the easiest ways to eliminate empathy is give them the job. There's an immediate acceptance of the bending of a moral code under the guise of survival and under the guise of sort of an automatic response to a task given to you. So I pictured these two scumbags who just kind of think that they're just doing their thing, but they're so far removed from empathy that all of a sudden the one guy starts to have this really strange feeling that he can't quite understand, or which is that he feels something. He feels something for this woman, and this woman who's coming down the line, and who he ultimately is going to have to shoot. And he's sort of fantasizing, like, and sort of asking his friend, like, "Hey, man, like, I know that we often rape and kill these people, but do you ever kind of want to just, I don't know, just fucking grab them and protect them and run away from here and then go escape?" And then and Cage's character is this sort of guy like, "Oh, hey, I know what you're thinking. Like, go ahead, I'll cover for you. Go ahead, rape her."
Yeah.
And the guy's like, "No, that's not what I mean. I mean, I want to protect her." And then it sort of goes into this fantasy. But the fantasy is distorted because the fantasy of love and the fantasy of protection is coming from this guy who's completely lost connection to the human spirit, has no idea what empathy really is. So it's like a child trying to understand how to, like sometimes a child will pet a dog or something, but it's hitting the dog. It's like, no, you got to like,
right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So this guy's fantasizing about in his own fucking patriarchal, fucked up, dominating, evil way. He's grappling with the idea, the very natural idea of protecting someone and being empathetic and being in love with somebody. And he goes into this fantasy, and even in the fantasy, he's fucked up. Even in the fantasy, he's like, I'm the first to touch you without gloves on. You're the first to kiss me without crying. It's this monster trying to express something beautiful, but there's nothing beautiful inside him. imagining escaping with this woman and living in the hills and them, having this simple life together, in which he lets her, clean for him. It's just, this fucked up. He's dealing with for the first time all these ideas, and then at the end he just shoots her.
Right.
At the end,
he does the job.
At the end, he does the job, and that's what I think is the truth of the phenomenon. At the end, the job gets done.
Man, that's it's a fucking fantastic story.
Thank you.
But then it's also a really fucking beautiful song. You know what I'm saying? Like, y'all really did that shit. Y'all did that. Man. Y'all killed it with the raps, the beat, the music, all of it, man. Like, that's just like, that to me is like one of the, that's a fucking achievement.
Thank you.
You know what I'm saying?
Me and Cage really sat down. I kind of laid out to him what I was trying to do, and we really sat down and talked about it. And the dynamic between the two guys, and Cage has a dark perspective, and I needed dark. I needed a guy who could get in touch with the darkness in the human heart, to be that guy who's like, no, I don't know what you're talking about. It was like the guy's friend who's like, listening and being like, nope, not ringing a bell. Like, I don't know what it's like. Nope, don't really know what it's like to feel anything. Which of course is not the truth of who Cage is, but he's a great writer, and he always goes,
man,
dark. So we really outlined it. And then the second part, the whole fantasy part, was really just me just sort of trying to put myself in the shoes of somebody who's trying but failing to be a good person. Really has no idea what it means, but is experimenting with it, daydreaming about it, and then kind of deciding like, I've always been proud of that one. And I think that, like you were saying, there are other genres in which kind of going there and building worlds and just sort of not worrying about losing anybody is par for the course to a degree. And sometimes when you do it in our genre, you might feel like you're taking a risk of losing people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that's
100%.
One thing that I definitely didn't ever give a fuck about, was whether or not I was losing people, because as far as I was concerned, I really never had anyone. Like, it wasn't all I ever got was because I wasn't thinking about anybody else when I made the shit. So whatever success that I did have, I could look through my whole catalog and be like, there's really nowhere on here that I backed away from, kind of, that shit. Right. So I just let myself go into it. Like, fuck it. This is the type of shit I'm interested in. That was a chance for me also to honor some of the lineage of the shit that I grew up on. I always like to think of myself as a child of this sort of dystopian historical future novel. Certainly everybody has picked up on it in my writing. Not sci-fi, like, oh, it's another planet and there's a crazy creature, like it has two mouths, but like the logical extension, the metaphor, the blown out metaphor of the human condition. And using science fiction, because it's simply in the future, you lose a lot of the prerequisite desire to keep it grounded. Just go for the metaphor and the commentary. And I'm not smart enough. I'm not a good enough writer to write the type of novels that inspired me. But I wanted to at least contribute my version.
Well, it ends with her being shot. And I think, maybe this is just me projecting, but that's why I saw the link between that and then Overly Dramatic Truth, because that seems to be very much about like ending something. Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I became for you when you would ask, telepath. You're too young to ask out loud. I'm too old and I know that. I can talk like you've not heard. I know weapons, you think words. I exposed you to these terms. You still chose to roll on her.
And I think for me, that song, Overly Dramatic Truth, it feels like it's in the vein of Last Good Sleep, Stepfather Factory, and that it seems to be very rooted in a real human moment that you're bringing into this album. And from a listener perspective, it feels real. I'm not going to ask you whether or not it is, but like, I guess what I'm curious about is that seems very much as dope of a song it is. It seems very much like a conversation between two people, and I'd like to hear about your thoughts when it came to like making like a song, like, and it's a dope song too, but it does have that private element to it.
Well, that song was sort of real and sort of not. I mean, it was inspired by something in my life, but it was an exaggeration. It was, again, I was using my life to create stories and to turn it into characters. And you're right, it does have a connection to Habeas Corpses. But like, if Habeas Corpses is the violent, scary version of a guy trying to do the right thing in a fantasy world that's very much not really grounded in like a simple personal story. I think that there's an element of this one that is it's sort of similar, except it's just a lot more grounded. And it is a good guy, but it's also not pure. He's not totally a good guy. I mean, he's also sort of self-aggrandizing. You know, it's like, oh, leave me. I'll just fuck you too well, and I won't be able to, you know, whatever it is, you know, like there was like, you know, you don't want any part of this, you know, this deepness. But, and, you know, it kind of came out of the fact that I was dating someone who I broke up with. And you know, it inspired it, because part of the reason that we broke up was just because I felt like I was in a different place. She was a little younger than me. And I was like, I just knew that I just wasn't where she was at. You know, it sucked because I really liked her, but I just knew where I was at was not where she was at. And, you know, she was in college. I was not in college. I was doing other shit. So I just sort of took that as an inspiration, some of those feelings, and kind of tried to talk about that situation and in a very exaggerated way. None of these songs aren't me, really, except maybe the last song on the record. And the first song on the record, which is based on a true story, but of course also not. But it's all based on shit that I felt. I don't know if you've ever dated somebody who's younger than you, and I'm not talking about like by vast amounts of time, but at a point in your life where the time that is between you made a big difference. You know what I mean?
It makes a difference. Yeah. Like you're you're like on the edge of two different generations almost, just, you know, by that difference.
Right.
3-4 years.
You've got 1 foot into the next phase of sort of what naturally comes with just being a little bit older. And there are different guys out there. There are different type of people out there. There are people who like that power dynamic. There are people who take advantage of that power dynamic because they liked having the natural edge of power over somebody in a relationship. And then there's the other way to do it, which is recognizing and being like, actually, I don't think that that's the right situation. But it's hard to say that without sounding condescending. I was just kind of exaggerating and going through that whole thought process and imagining somebody who sort of had some of the feelings that I had when I had split up with this girl, but just to a much more dramatic degree, which is why I called it the overly dramatic truth, because I was like, this is so fucking so over the top, you know? It's like, it really is just like, go on without me, I'm too tortured. But it was fun to write. It was fun. It was fun to write, and it was fun to perform. And it was rooted in something I felt. But, you know, the reality of it is, it wasn't that serious. But these are stories, you know? So I figured I'd just throw myself into whatever the character is fully, knowing that I could also risk it, you know, that everyone might think that this is literally me. And it's like, well, yeah, that's a risk that you either are okay with taking or not. And I think that there are a lot of people who won't risk that. It's just not what they want to do. They don't want to risk confusion. For me, it was okay. I didn't really give a shit.
Well, and that kind of leads to another question I had, which probably has a similar answer. But, you know, throughout the history of you making songs, you can have a song that is a really dope story, but your approach to the lyrics is never like simple. It's never like this happened and this happened and this happened. Like it's always a stylistic flair on it, right?
I like to think so. Yeah, I hope.
Oh yeah,
so.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah. Because of that, I'm sure there are people out there who just don't get it. And I wonder how much you're ever concerned with that. Like people like that you could spend all this time crafting this story, but there's some people who will never understand this story. Like how much does that matter?
No, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
I figured that's
I mean, because there are people who do get it, you know.
Yeah.
The truth is that the way that I wrote, the way that I do my shit, it's not built for the fucking mainstream, man. It's not. Those records are not built for people getting them really quickly. Mm-hmm. As long as somebody fucking gets this shit, then I'm all right. Now, how many people understand what the fuck you're saying?
I mean, yeah, no, I run into it all the time. Yeah, but it's baffling to me.
Well, they catch probably what they catch.
Yeah, yeah.
The hope of these things is that the presentation and the feeling that is invoked from the music keeps them around long enough so that eventually they kind of get what you're saying. For me, that's been the history of me with music. I fell in love with music way before I could understand the music. I was in love with Prince's music way fucking before I could get what the fuck he was talking about. I didn't understand anything that he said, which is not the same. I'm not saying like, oh, one day you'll grow up and you'll understand. It's like, nah. But what I'm saying is like my relationship with music was one that was intimate in the sense that I always had to come back to it. I always kept it running. And like there's shit that I'm catching to this day. There's shit that's just a private between me and music where I'm like, I'll get you one day. I'll get you one day. Like,
Right.
It has nothing to do with anybody but me and the music. And I'm listening to it, and like 20 years later, I'm like, okay, I get it. I hear the word now.
You know, it's something I had to learn because I had the same thing where music has been powerful for me. Like there's still like there's Pixies songs that I love. I have no idea what the fuck Frank Black is talking about at all. No idea. Couldn't tell you a lyric, but I love the song. So
you know
like,
how long it took
I've
me
always
to understand that he was saying Caribbean? I was just like,
I still don't
swimming
know.
in the Bahamas. And I was just like,
you know, so like I understand that relationship. But I think when I came into music, like I came in as a rapper, I got, you know, like barely a producer. So like to me, my whole contribution to the song is these ideas I've been slaving over. You know what I'm saying? And so like it really hit me when I first understood that there were people who were gonna fuck with my music, but had no idea what I was talking about. Like that was a big mind fuck for me. But it was the beginning of a lesson that you learn overall, that you like once you put it out, it's up to people to kind of have their own relationship with it, you know?
Yeah, and I think you also got to be like realistic with yourself. What type of writer are you? You know, because there's ways to write in which people get very clearly what you're saying. But I think that if you're playing with pattern and words and you're really into the poetry aspect of writing, you need to be okay with that being something that's a little impenetrable sometimes. I definitely have had a way of doing my shit where I thought it was very clear sometimes, and people were just like, I don't know what the fuck you're saying. And I'm just like, damn, I thought that one was pretty clear, you know?
Right.
And then I've had people surprise the shit out of me and just really get it. Like there's no problem. Like they completely get not only the references, but also the subtleties, the stuff that's a little bit buried. I mean, in the way that I'm writing and the way that I chose to write and the stuff that I was inspired by is a little buried. You know, sometimes it's not just something that unfolds itself. That has its ups and it has its downs, you know. The downside is that you can feel like, oh shit, like people aren't really hearing what I'm saying. If they heard what I was saying, maybe they would be into it. You know. The upside is that we're just trying to work on art, right? Do you think that, you know, Jackson Pollock would ever give a shit if anyone was like, I don't understand?
Right. So, you know, we're talking about complex writing. We're talking about, you know, abstract thought and poetry. And you were saying that for you, this is what you do. And the mistake would be to possibly try to position this where it's like top 40, because people aren't, for the most part, going to get it. It's not that kind of thing. But, you know, on this album, you know, it's 2006, 2007. You got Trent Reznor, you know, Cat Power, you know, Mars Volta, TV on the radio. And it's not necessarily mainstream, but it's it feels a lot more above ground than underground hip hop. And did you have any anxiety about that, taking that step, putting yourself in a position where there's a chance more, like hella more people will be exposed to your product, and will it? Did you have any anxiety about how it would perform in off of a higher platform?
No, luckily that wasn't an issue.
It wasn't.
No. No,
I mean, shit. It's. I don't know. It seemed pretty damn successful. So I really don't know from your vantage point. You know.
Sure, it was successful in my world, in our world. And I always had been very comfortable doing about as good as you could in the indie rap world. And it was like I was doing Coachella, but I was like, you had to have a magnifying glass to see my name, which is fine. I thought that the record had a chance of taking me a little bit further in my career for sure. But more importantly, I thought that I had stuck the landing. It wasn't like, here's another Fantastic Damage. It wasn't that. And I used, some of my friendships with, like all those people that you mentioned are on that record because I had worked with them in the past, like, few years, before that record.
Yeah.
Like I worked with Reznor. He sought me out, to do a remix. And then when I asked him to do that, he was like, yeah. He was so generous, like amazingly generous. I mean, Trent Reznor's an icon, and you kind of don't know who's going to be cool. Like, people can be cool, but are they really going to, like, work to, like, if you ask them to be on your album, are they really going to, like, try as hard as you are? Are they really going to?
Right.
And that's always what I think that the danger is with bringing other people in that you sort of admire. A, the danger is that you walk away from it being like, But B, I think it's this. It's that your record is the most important thing to you in the world. And it's not something you can assume is the case with somebody else, especially if they're up here, and you're down here. And the cool motherfuckers don't treat it like that. The cool motherfuckers, like Trent Reznor, send you back their best. I had just asked them to sing something. I wrote it. I asked them to sing it. And I said, maybe play some guitars or something. I don't know. You're Trent Reznor. Like, I expected to have like one little thing and I would use it. And he sent back like a fucking 90 tracks of like him doing this shit in multiple different ways, harmonizing, playing mad different shit, and guitars and shit. And I probably used about as much of it as I possibly could. I think that he probably thought that I was just going to use like one thing. But I was like, I felt like I had hit the lottery. I was like, yo, this motherfucker just sent me like, so there's mad heart. You can hear it when you listen to Flyentology, like.
I know I haven't been walking a humble path. I know I cursed at your name and then laughed. I know I founded a name to bend calf. The servitude of groveling frame is pain task. I gotta figure it can't hurt to ask. Suspension of disbelief and uniquely free flash. Faithfully shaken, now trapped. 30,000 and dropping, it's on and popping and last. Give me the sky, that's all that I cry. I'll become a son of this wealthy town. Give me the sky, that's all that I'll say. I'll become a soul till
It's maximalist to the point of ridiculousness. Like I don't even know if he likes that song. Like I remember like sending it to him. Like part of me thinks like he must think that I just completely just took what he did and just was like Trent Reznor, it's Trent. But, which I definitely did.
A little bit
because I was psyched. I was like, hell yeah, this is who the fuck. What other fucking rapper has gotten Trent Reznor on the record? And I'm not even in the mainstream. I was psyched and I was proud. Like, yeah, people fuck with me, And but if you listen to that, yeah, you'd be like, yo, are there like 18 layers of Trent Reznor on this shit? Like, there's definitely. And people like Mars Volta, who I had done remixes for and who were just awesome dudes, and Sean Marshall, who was someone that I knew from just the Lower East Side. I definitely reached out to other genres for that record. It was about the tone of the record. It was about the scope of the record. And because the music was, like you mentioned, a little bit more melodic and a little bit more epic, I think, those really fit. I found myself straddling multiple worlds. Because I obviously just started as a dude with a sampler, like a kid with a sampler. But I had gotten to the point where people from other genres were getting into my shit and bringing me in and asking me to work with them. And it didn't feel like a duality or anything. It wasn't like, oh, this is when I'm in my rock thing. And this is because these people were coming to me because I did what I did in rap, for me. So it was cool to kind of have an excuse to orchestrate these voices that I and friendships that I had made through this stuff through my filter and kind of like bring them into my world and be like, if I were doing it, it'd be like this. It was the first record where I had reached out to people like that. Most of the time it was pretty internal,
Yeah. It was the camp, like the cats you had been around. So So that's the position of, any anxiety about it possibly being mainstream. But let me ask the reverse then, and we kind of touched on this a little earlier, but like you said, for the most part, you didn't give a fuck if anybody, if you lost people potentially trying to, do some different shit. Um, and I definitely remember, for as much as I love this record, there were people like the fucking meat and potatoes underground rap fans who pushed back a little bit on you trying to go to these different places. And I guess
what were their fucking
knowing
names?
Yeah.
What were their names? And what are their? More importantly, what are their MySpace pages? Because I'm angry.
Well, yeah, it was a hip hop infinity. You know what I mean? J Lyrical 79. You know what I'm saying? But I knowing that you didn't really give a shit about it, I guess the question is, were you surprised by it at all?
I didn't notice, my dude. Sorry, I didn't notice. Yeah,
good shit.
I mean, look, maybe I should have, but when I say that I didn't give a fuck, I mean I really don't give a fuck. It's not like something that I'm like, I don't give a fuck. I didn't think about it. I was just trying to make a piece of music, you know what I mean? And I was trying to tour the world and perform that music, and we did, and that record got sold more than anything I'd ever done. And I was like, in my world, I was like, this is a success, and because I did the record I wanted to do, and I was like, nah, actually, I think I'm at the top of my game on this one. I don't always think that, by the way, of myself. Like I don't look back on all my records like, oh, I was at the top of my game. I really felt at that time that was the best piece of work that I had ever done. But also, like I said, I didn't care. Like I had no problem showing other people the scope of my inspiration, the scope of the way that I thought about music. And I think that I did push the boundaries on that one for sure. And you'd be a fool to want to have both. You can't do both. And you can't be like, I'm going there, I'm going to go there. And at the same time be like, I just hope everybody loves it equally. You know what I mean? The world that we're in, man, and the world that I was in was a self-contained one to the degree where I somewhat created it so that I could be on my own musically. So I didn't have to think about it. I'm way more exposed now in Run the Jewels. Yeah. Run the Jewels is like damn near mainstream music now, as far as we can be. It's still dudes who probably could never quite be mainstream music, but there's more people looking at this shit now than there was then, and I still don't care. I just don't have the capacity. I don't have the capacity to worry about both things. I have to do one or the other. And entertainers have to worry a lot more. I entertain in the context of what I do, but if you're an entertainer, that means that you got to kind of like win motherfuckers. And a lot is riding on whether or not you can do a good first impression on someone who has no idea what you do. You're a stand-up comedian. You get up in front of a crowd and tell a joke. There's no real world in which you can be like, they'll get it eventually. No. But for what we do, creating a piece of art that can sit in somebody's world forever and can potentially lure them back in for repeated listens, a little bit less pressure, I think. But more than anything, man, I just think that I wanted to create something that I could do, like I could feel it on stage. Like I could feel emotions. I feel emotions on stage.
I could feel things.
Well, I mean, hey, look, there's a lot of people who will just feel cool on stage. And I do a lot of I feel cool and funny on stage music too. But in that moment in my life, I wanted to do a show where it could be powerful and simple and not have to talk much and not have to say, raise your fucking hands in the air, For whatever reason, at that time in my life, I was like, I don't really even want to talk to the audience. I want the talking to be about the fucking the songs. That was just the phase I'm in. Now I'm gonna put your hands in the air, motherfucker, again. So,
It's all cycles, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just to bring this to a close, man. One thing that it was fun running into when I was doing research to put the interview together. The fucking blog is still up, man.
Is it?
I'll Sleep When You're Dead blog spot is still up. And it's funny because there's so many entries on here. And every time I start looking at it, I just keep bouncing around to more entries. The thing is amazing. But just as an undertaking, talk us through the idea of creating the blog as you're making the album.
You know, it's funny. That thing kind of grew a life of its own. Like even in the past 10 years, it's almost like this legendary thing that at the time I wasn't really thinking too much about it. And it's crazy. It's still up. I got to look at it. I haven't even looked at it for
still up, man.
Years. I mean, I don't know.
You and all that mustache, dude. It's so much mustache. It's out of control.
Traumatizing time. It's a tough time in my life, man. Well, here's the thing about the mustache. This is a trick that I learned from Camus. So Camus was the guy that I learned about forcing yourself to work by embarrassing yourself through facial hair. Camus used to shave his head in the George Jefferson when he had to do it, when he had to work and he had to force himself not to go out because Camus partied. You know, Camus would go out and just wow the fuck out in these streets of New York. And so he came up with a system where he's like, the only way that I can stop myself from doing this is if I look so horrible that I won't go out. And so he used to make himself bald up here, and he was like 28, you know, and so I took that theory and I was like, all right, well, I'm not going to do that, but maybe I'll fuck with a mustache. And so I was like, because if you have a mustache, you immediately look like a fucking dirtbag, right? Like you immediately look like a scumbag. And if you have a really big mustache, it's just repellent to this is the way I thought. Of course, unfortunately, the thing that I didn't realize was that it kind of had the opposite effect on I didn't know that like the mustache wave was about to come back hard. I'll put it to you that way.
Yeah. It was the hipster mustache
for
wave,
white guys. Yeah, I didn't know. I was on the unwitting cutting edge of that shit. Now I rock a mustache all the time. I don't give a shit. But at the time, it was a horrifying reality, and so I grew that. I was trying to force myself to finish the album, and I remember there's a picture of the shit like this, and on the blog. But one day I just started making this blog spot thing. It's interesting because now we do that with Twitter and Instagram every day, right? Or at least if we're in a bad place in our lives. It just became this almost mood board for me. It was while I was making the record, I was trying to sort it out for myself and trying to sort out what it meant. I didn't think too many people would see that blog, but it caught on. It was sort of me putting up pictures and putting little pieces of writing in that were kind of inspiring me during the process of making these songs for this record. It was like me trying to kind of organize my thoughts and organize the imagery for the record. I don't know what state it's in now. Is it just up in the way it was before? I got to check it out.
It seems like it. It seems like it's just up in reverse chronological order, and you can just click through all the entries on the side, and it's just there. It's really something. It's really something because you know the way blogs operated, of course, was that you would just put down your thoughts that day. You know what I'm saying? And like you were kind of breadcrumbing the creation of the album, and like now. I can fully sit with the album and go back and look and be like, damn, this was the seed of this. And this was the seed of this. And like, and it's really dope as like companion creative. You know what I'm saying? It's really tight that way.
Maybe I should fucking print it out, sell it with a deluxe version of the vinyl.
There you go.
Maybe I can get some money off of that shit. You know what I mean? I got to get my money out of those motherfuckers. But it was,
that's right.
Well, we're making things, whether it be scribbling down on in a book or whether it be saving a picture on your phone, it just invokes some sort of feeling. The times that I've done shit like that, where I've been like, I'm not really getting anywhere right this second, but I still am being creative. The wheels are turning here. I've never been a diary guy. I've never been a journal guy. So that was like the first time I ever tried that. And I abandoned it pretty quickly. The way that the record starts is with something that did happen to me where I was in the train station and I bumped into someone that I knew late at night and I didn't want to see them. I didn't really know them, but I knew them, you get trapped, you got to ask what's up because it's polite, but just begging, praying to yourself, like, I hope they don't tell me the truth. I hope they don't tell me the truth. I don't really want to know. I can't handle the truth. I just want you, let's just be polite here. Like, tell me everything's cool. Give me a pound. Let's go. And so the record opens with that experience, but instead of it being, Oh, yeah, everything's cool. All right, cool. Good to see you, pal. Let's go. The dude's like, oh, you want to know how I'm doing? Here's how I'm doing. I'm going fucking crazy. I'm going crazy.
Bumped into this kid I knew, he often it was strange. So I ignored the blood on his laces, so this cat can save face. The dunks in the gay stayed in a off gray haze, and a lump in his pocket talked to the ox that he clutched safe. So I saluted him there, waiting for the A. Trapped in an empty platform without the option to escape. Gave him a stand and yo, what up, man? How you landing? And the hypnotized response was no surprise. Yeah, we all do. That's a standardized refrain, but on some really real, man. Good to see you. Really, what the dilly did. Oops, thought screwed the boot, just too much. Knew the truth. On the train now, a caboose. In his brain now, no recluse.
And you know, from the moment that you're on this Tasmanian pain coaster, as I call it, it's about a truth dump. It's about a dimensional truth dump. All of the lies of what we tell ourselves to keep ourselves sane, all of the justifications that we make for just even being able to get through the day, because you have to lie to yourself about, you know, sometimes just to get through the day without crying, just to get through the day without breaking down or feeling loss or feeling confusion or shame or whatever it may be. In a society that is completely erected by falsities and then built upon those falsities. And then we're all tasked unwittingly to try and maintain them. But we're built and then immediately tasked with this job. Hey, welcome to the world. Now you have to fucking justify this monster that we've created. See if you can walk around and hold this illusion up for us. And I think that some people crack under that. And I know I have. And so the whole story is about this loss of the mirage, this traumatic, devastating pulling away and just dealing with nothing but madness and truth. And then at the end of it, deciding that despite that, the honorable thing to do is to fight. The honorable thing to do is to live, because it's the one thing that you can do. The one thing that you have control over, that you can fight. And that was the story. That's All Sleeping You're Dead.
Well, that's beautiful, man. And that's a beautiful place, I think, to leave it. This is an album, you know, I'm happy to be able to talk through, celebrate, and hopefully, you know, reintroduce some people too, man. I think it's just, you know, it's one of them ones, man. This is some high level shit, man.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
It's an amazing album, and I'm glad to get this insight from you about it.
Yeah, my pleasure, Mike. I appreciate it.
And I think we'll call it an episode here, folks. Thanks for tuning in and listening to Mr. LP speak his mind and his experiences about this project. And, you know, of course, tune in next week for more.
Finally getting a chance.
Till next time, y'all. Peace.
Stony Island Audio.
Hey listeners, even amidst this crazy year we've had, lots of people have been creating great art, from impactful movies to binge-worthy TV to entertaining podcasts like the one you're listening to right now. And now, we're in the middle of an exciting time of the year, awards season. Our podcast, Love Under Lockdown, is nominated for a Best Documentary Webby Award, and we would love your support. Love Under Lockdown follows 4 relationships, all in different stages as they navigate living together and apart during the pandemic. Listen as they confront career changes, health scares, childcare, and even a breakup, and bear it all for us to hear. All episodes of Love Under Lockdown are available now on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And make sure to vote for Love Under Lockdown under Best Documentary, Limited Series, or Special at vote.webbyawards.com. Voting closes May 6th. That's Love Under Lockdown at vote.webbyawards.com. Available now. All episodes are available now on Apple Podcasts. All episodes are available now on Spotify.